What got you into the board gaming hobby?
Probably when I was playing Risk with my dad when I was like 10.
I would probably say Mousetrap, because I remember that was the first board game I played as a kid, and just trying to figure out how I can get it to work or just how to break it with all the contraptions you had in the game.
Probably Warhammer 40K.
Dice Forge.
Well, I've always played Magic the Gathering, so it was kind of the next step to go into board gaming. And I started watching tabletop, and they just snowballed from there.
Probably be Risk, way back. In junior high, I started playing Risk. We played weekend-long games, and I've been hooked ever since.
Patchwork. Patchwork got me into board gaming. It was the first game I ever played. I played it in a board game cafe, and it was the first time I realized there was more games besides like Monopoly.
Well, I mean, I always loved playing games when I was younger, but I'll tell you, Will Wheaton and really tabletop really brought us back into the hobby, and you know, your entry-level games really took us further. So your Carcassonne and your early Euro games really got us going, and now we're playing D&D. We're all over the board on that. So.
I got into board games in the 1970s when I started off as a war gamer, and around 9 years ago I discovered Settlers of Catan at a local convention and turned me from a war gamer to a board gamer, and I've just been enjoying it ever since.
Well, it was about when I was 7 or 8 years old. My dad brought home the original Gettysburg from Avalon Hill. That's going back to probably in the early and mid-70s. I had an older brother who he and his friends played a lot of the Avalon Hill box games. France 1940, Third Reich, Panzer Blitz, you know, all those old classics, Tactics 2.
One of the first games I got into playing was Risk growing up. I used to play with all my best friends' brothers and their friends.
Well, I had some people I met in my psychology class in college, and it was one of those, hey, we're 90s kids, let's get together and do things. What do people do? And it turned into a board game night every week. We started with Settlers of Catan and all of the hip Euro games, and I've been doing it ever since. That was 10 years ago now.
I don't know, I played a lot of card games, Magic, Pokemon, stuff like that. My buddies were playing. I just, hey, that looks cool. I like video games, nerdy stuff, so I checked it out and haven't looked back since. It's been fun.
Well, I've been gaming since about '78, so I started with Dungeons and Dragons and worked my way up through every single role-playing game I could find. By the time I got married and had kids, I found I couldn't do that as much, so I started breaking out board games.
My brothers and sisters and parents started playing board games and stuff, so I decided to play.
And I started playing as a kid too, and we just carried it on with a family tradition.
The game that got me into the board game hobby was Magic the Gathering.
And the game that got me into this back in the early 1960s was a game called Millborns.
And what got me started when I was just a little guy was Electronic Detective.
Puerto Rico.
Betrayal at the House on the Hill. I had never played like a really in-depth board game before, and that one really got me into those. So.
Growing up with playing Star Trek games with my dad.
So I'd say the game that got me into board gaming is probably chess, actually. That was my first major game, and I still play. My dad here taught me, and I'd say that chess is really the game that got me into board gaming.
For me early on, it was my parents. I mean, just getting me into board gaming, and that's the same thing for us. As they were getting old enough, it was fun to challenge them, to give them new things to learn, and give us things to do as a family. We enjoy it a lot.
Probably the first game of tabletop, Dungeons and Dragons, I was introduced by a priest and his wife and another priest and a deacon after church one day, and I was hooked.
My grandfather taught me cribbage when I was very young, and that progressed into card games, and then card games progressed into Magic, which I played for a very long time. And then through Magic, I met the Stoneblade guys, who are now by Ultra Pro, and now I play all the games.
I think the board game that brought me into board games was Settlers. I think most people, Settlers of Catan is sort of a good intro to more complicated board games, to know things are just beyond Monopoly and Scrabble.
Imperial Assault.
So the game that got me into board gaming is Pandemic.
He actually introduced me to it. And the game I love to play is Pandemic Legacy, but pretty much anything co-op.
The game that actually brought me into gaming was Arkham Horror.
My game that got me into the board gaming was Firefly.
Yeah, it's the same. Beth is the one that brought me into play games at the local game store. And Firefly kind of caught our eye, mostly because we enjoyed the show, and the game turned out to be really well.
Just like the show.
I think Last Night on Earth is the game that got me into the board game hobby.
First game that got me into board gaming may actually be D&D for me.
Yeah.
Just because it got me with friends who then brought tons of more games to the table.
Yeah, probably the same, except probably Catan or Magic probably brought me in. Yeah, got me into game stores, so.
The game that got me into board gaming is Love Letter. On our, third date, he brought it with him, and I'd never really played hobby board games, but we played Love Letter, and we played it like 10 times or something that day, and it was a lot of fun, and I stuck around with him, and I stuck around with board gaming.
I work at a comic store, Toy Wiz, and I actually play a lot of board games over there, and I play a lot of Warhammer. That's what I'm here for, actually.
I would probably say was the first Descent campaign I ever finished.
The game that got me to board game was Ticket to Ride.
And then for me it was Forbidden Island.
Beating my older brother at Stratego when I was like 9 years my 9 years my elder, beating him at Stratego.
My best friend Ben got me into board gaming when we were like 6 years old, playing the catapults and blasting each other with the little red balls.
I started playing Magic for a while, and then my buddy brought me to Gen Con one year and made me try all these games. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then shortly my Magic collection got traded in for board games, and now all I do is board games and have no Magic.
The game that really hooked me, I think, was Munchkin.
Probably Lords of Waterdeep, actually. It's a fairly simple game. Yeah. She knows what I'm talking about. No, Lords of Waterdeep, it's a fairly simple just worker placement game, and I found I really enjoyed like resource management games of that type. I'm not tremendously good at them, but I still love them deeply. And so that was probably the first game I bought. And it's also one that I used to introduce other people to board games.
Tom Bassel got me into the hobby, and my favorite game is Vicious Fishes. Vicious Fishes. His very bad game he designed.